So everyone has their, their water and their supplies and everything. So I
Yeah,
think everyone,
it's, if you were here last time, it's going to be very similar. If you're new, we're working with just simple a paint set today. And I will be showing a few types of brushes, but really, if you just have like one or two round brushes, mainly, that's going to be perfect. So brushes, and I love to have 2 cups of water so that we can have a rinse cup and a fresh water cup, but that's also optional. It just helps save you from going up to the sink as frequently. So, and of course, paper. Yes.
April, it's good to see you again. Judith, hi. Ashley, Cheryl, good morning. Hi, Sue. Hi,
Yeah,
Susan.
I see some familiar faces here. That's so fun.
It's great. It's really great. Okay, well, so Leana, why don't we start? I mean, first of all, hi everyone. I'm Nicole. I'm the CEO of Modern Prairie. It's good to see a lot of you again. Happy holidays. I've got my mom on this call, who's also part of the brand. Susan is here as well.
Hey, Sue.
And of course, and we've got Leana here, who has been so incredible as a partner to Modern Prairie. If you haven't seen her calendar or her watercolor prints on our site, you should check them out. But just having her relay her knowledge to us and bring creativity into the brand. I mean, it's so amazing to spend a Saturday morning with all of you and paint. It's just a really great way to reconnect and I think use our brains in a different way. So I'm really excited to be able to do this with all of you today. So welcome. This is going to be great. Friendly reminder, if you have questions, everyone is muted for now, but that doesn't mean you have to be throughout the session. If you have a question, there's a button on the bottom of your screen that says raise hand, or you can just unmute yourself or ask to be unmuted, and we'll do what we did last time, and I'll just call on you and we'll just converse, and Leana will answer your questions in real time. Sound good?
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Nicole.
Sure.
Well, welcome again, everybody. It's so much fun to be back, and I see some familiar faces from last time, which I love. And I hear that some of you have been practicing, which is awesome. For those of you who were here last time, I'd love to know just like how it's going. If you feel like you've seen improvement, feel free to unmute and just give a quick little blurb if you'd like to. Oh my gosh. You're like 5 steps ahead here.
Well, no. Remember at the last time I was saying that my paintbrush wasn't, I went
Yes.
out and kind of looked around, and it's amazing how Facebook or Instagram listens to you, and all of a sudden I had all these things come up. So
you found some good options?
Yeah, I'm not sure if they're the best yet. Time will tell. But just a quick story. Yeah. I'm a special ed teacher, and we're painting tiles to give some of our emotional support students some ownership at the school. And everybody was kind of like standoffish at first, and I brought one of my children in a wheelchair over, and we just started painting, and I brought brushes down. It was with tempera paints, and everybody is painting, and it was so therapeutic. Like, half the school was just painting, and everybody was a mess. It was great.
Oh, that is amazing. What a great story. It really is true. I think creativity can bring people together in a very unique way. And so I love that. Oh my gosh. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yeah. So over Thanksgiving, my sister-in-law April was visiting. I'm in Indiana and she's in Tennessee. And she gave me this as an early Christmas
my gosh.
gift. And the book.
Is that one from her shop that she sells?
Yep. So we've been practicing. So we put all the colors in here.
Oh my goodness. Okay, that is my goal, Shelly. I still don't have like a swatch sample.
And I'm trying
Look at your little potted plants.
And
oh my
gosh. A tree. And then this kind of technique where you put the water on the paper first, and then you put the color, and it kind of swirls around and did some ornaments.
I love it.
Yeah, thanks.
Wow,
Oh,
Shelley,
gosh.
those are incredible. You need to send
Yes.
pictures. That looks
Isn't it beautiful?
unbelievable.
That
Lovely.
set is gorgeous. I love
Yes,
the wood,
April.
the
And
wood
wooden
Wow.
paints.
Yeah.
Oh, and that it has like a mixing area built into it. That's
Yep.
gorgeous.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well,
fine.
you'll have to include a link to that shop again at the end today.
Okay.
I'm sure people would be
April
interested.
can do that.
Oh, thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to share? I
I-
love it.
This last time was my first time to ever pick up a paintbrush. And so it was such a fun, I've just had fun the last few weeks, like playing around. And it's truly just been a creative playtime, which I have
Oh,
loved. And I finished making some just gift tags for
oh
presents.
my
And
gosh.
it's been fun in the evenings to like sit down with my wax seal and like put the gift tags on the presents with wax. And yeah, it's just
Oh.
been a lovely practice that I've really enjoyed.
Oh, Ashley, that is so beautiful. Gosh, I mean, I can't believe that you created that after only painting one time.
Oh, I would say the technique is probably not there. It's just been like, oh, I realized I
Well,
like to
it
put
turned
lines
out
on a
great.
page and this is fun. So
Right. And that just goes to show like that's the whole point of all of this is really to just have fun and play. I love that what you said there, creative playtime. It's like we often get stuck in our head a little bit of wanting whatever we do to turn out perfectly, right? I know I do anyway. And so if you can just let go a little bit and just enjoy learning and playing, and whatever comes of that is so beautiful, and it's okay if it's not perfect. And in fact, it's better if it's not perfect, I think, because it has just that handmade quality. So thank you all so much for sharing. I hope that today just expands your knowledge of watercolor even further. And for those who are new, we're going to be covering a few of the techniques we went over last time, but we'll also be stretching into some other things as well. So I'm going to share you a little practice page, and this is super messy, but that's kind of intentional. It's going to show kind of what this first page of our practice is going to look like. I've just been mixing colors. I've been playing with different like sprigs and flowers. We're going to get into some different pine trees. And then eventually we're going to bring all of it together into a beautiful wreath. And then we'll talk about some other ideas too that you can add to your gift tags or cards. So I always love to start with preparing my palette. So go ahead and grab your paint set. I'm working with a very basic one here, same one I used last time, but whatever you have is perfect. To prepare your paint, you just need to add water. It's pretty straightforward. There's a little shortcut to doing this. If you have a spray bottle, you can give it a little spritz, but you can also just use a brush and get a little bit of water on that brush and just add it to your paint. Now, I'm mainly going to be using only a few colors today. I've got a green, a red, and a purple. And we're going to do a little mixing with those colors as well, but let's just go ahead and get those three colors started. And so I've given it a spritz. I'm also going to add a little more water to each color just to really get it nice and wet. So I'm basically kind of forming a little puddle on top of the paint first, and then I will swirl it all in to get it nice and fluid. So my goal with this class today is just to have fun, like we were talking about. It is your time. So of course, follow along with me, but if you want to just start making your cards, work on your gift tags, this is just like set aside time for you to enjoy that creativity. And I know it can be hard to find time at the holidays to do this kind of thing. So don't feel like you have to stick to every single little thing I'm doing. You know, just use this time as you would like. And of course, I'll be walking us through a few things, but go at your own pace. And we will have some time together at the end to work on our gift tags and cards, but feel free to start on those earlier if you want to. All right, so what I like to do when I mix up my paint is first create just a little swatch so that I see what that color actually looks like on my paper. This is the green straight out of my palette, and it's really quite a nice green. I'll be using this for sure. And then I'll rinse that off in my rinse cup and get my purple. So as you can see, I'm really working that water into the paint. I want it to be really, really smooth and liquidy. It should not feel sticky. It should be really, really fluid. So we'll do a test in a minute to make sure we've got the right consistency, but just to start with, go ahead and make that swatch. Now this purple, it's a lovely purple, excuse me, but I will be mainly using the purple for mixing my color today. But I'll go ahead and see what that looks like. Okay. And we've got our red. So your color palette is really just up to your own aesthetic and taste and just whatever kind of look you're going for. You might be going for a really bright, classic, traditional palette and using that really cheery red. And that's what this red is here, straight from my palette. I love this for berries, you know, especially like holly berries, things like that. Or you might want to make your palette look a little more neutral and natural. And so what I'm going to show you right now is just two simple mixes you can do to modify these colors slightly and get that more neutral palette. So the first one I'm going to call cranberry. This is just a mixture of red and a touch of purple. So I'm bringing my red that I've already mixed up over to the end area. For me, this is where my mixing area is. Just, you can use a plate, a bowl, whatever you have. And so I'm scooping out some paint with my brush and moving it over. And then I'll rinse that brush and get just, I'm going to start with just a touch of purple, because purple is a pretty dark, strong color. We don't want to overpower the red. We just want to modify it a little bit. So mixing that up, and we'll test it out here. So here you can see it is quite a bit darker than my red. And it's, yeah, I'm liking that. It's kind of a maroon color. So I'm going to keep it there, but you can always add more red, add more purple, and modify based on whatever you're going for. I'm going to lower this down just a little bit for you guys. Okay. The other color I want to mix up is a nice dark green. So I'm going to call this one spruce. We'll use this as a nice dark for our wreath and maybe our pine trees. And for this one, I'm starting with green. That'll be my base color. Moving it over to that mixing area. And again, I'm going to add purple. Purple is just a nice color for mixing. It's just got a nice blend to it that kind of neutralizes a color. So you can do a lot with purple. Okay, we'll try this out. And yeah, so this is just a darker, more a little bit grayish blue it turns into when I add the purple. So there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and just mix up a little more of that so I have plenty on hand to get started. So I mentioned we're going to just quickly test out our color to see if we have the right combination of water and paint. And I'll just show you on one color. Feel free to test all your colors if you want to. The test is, I'm going to rinse my brush here. And let's just load it up on my brush. I'm swirling the paint around and I'm going to give it just a couple of wipes. And once I wipe it off, what I should be able to do is draw a line all the way down my paper without the paint getting sticky or scratchy. So it might fade a little bit and that's okay. But what we don't want is like sticky or scratchy, like you don't want the paper showing through. So that's your test to make sure your combo of water to paint is where you want it. Now I'm going to show you a little trick real quick because you may have noticed I have like a little stray mark here on my paper. This just happens sometimes. You got to learn the tricks, you know? So I'm going to grab a paper towel. Always good to have a little paper towel on hand. And I also have a flat brush here. This is a 1/2 inch flat brush. You can use a round brush too. I just typically use a flat brush. Now, it's already started to soak in a little bit, so we'll see how well this does. But what I'm going to do is just add some water to the top of that and then wiggle my brush over top. And then I can dab it with the paper towel and it's gone. So it's a really good technique to know. Believe me, I use it a lot. So just wanted to show you that. All right, so this page, like I said, this is going to be just a fun practice page. I'm going to show you a few different types of sprigs, leaves, berries, and different elements that we can add to our wreath in a few minutes. And we're going to be testing out a few different brushes just so you can see what's possible with different brushes. But again, all you really need is a simple round brush to do most of this. Okay, so let's start with a simple little pine branch. Now, I am going to show you 2 ways to do this. The first is my favorite way. This is with a flat brush, and this is a little 1/4 inch flat brush. Very cheap little brush, but it does wonders. And to prepare the brush, I'm just going to swirl it into my green for my pine branch and then wipe it pretty well on the edge of my palette. We want this to be well loaded up, but not dripping wet. So I've got the paint on my brush and now I can just simply use the end of my brush to create some really precise, crisp lines. So that's kind of the center of the pine branch. And then I can go on either side of it with short little strokes and just come into that main center line. And it just really quickly and easily turns into a lovely little pine branch. So of course, this is just a lovely little element to add to any holiday wreath, or, you know, you could even do it as like a little standalone thing if you maybe did like a little crisscross here. And did it like that. So this little flat brush is really good for any piney little branches. So that's just a fun one to try if you have a flat brush. But if you don't, you can do this with a round brush too, and I'll show you that as well. I've got this round brush here. Now this is a bigger brush, and it takes a little practice to get good control with a bigger brush, but I'll show you how I do it. Again, I'm loading the paintbrush up and wiping it really well, squeezing out any extra water, and then I can use the tippy tip of that brush to draw a really thin line and do the same thing using the tip of that brush. So it's just a little bit trickier to get that thin line with this brush. You certainly can do it. It just takes a little bit of practice. The flat brush kind of automatically does it for you, which is just kind of nice. So, you know, I encourage you to try out both and see which one you like better. The nice thing with the round brush, though, I will say, is you can do this smaller scale like what I showed you, but you can also kind of increase the size easily as well by just adding a little more pressure to your stroke and, you know, kind of doing the same thing, but just pressing a little harder. So the nice thing with a round brush is that it's very, very versatile. And so you can do it for almost all of your botanical elements. It's definitely the brush that I use the most when I'm painting. So there we go. All right. Wow, guys, I did it again. It's always fun when you like make mistakes as you're teaching a workshop.
There are no mistakes, Leana. There are no mistakes.
That's right. See, maybe we can.
It's a happy accident. It looks great. You got to make
A
that part of
happy
the
accident.
painting.
Yes. We'll put my little trick to the test here. See if we can get this amount up. Like I said, I use this a lot. Rub that in. As long as you catch it quickly, it really does work pretty well.
The magic of watercolor.
Right? There we go. So watercolor is known for being hard because you can't like put white over it and just fix it, but there are some tricks of the trade that make it easier. So, all right. Does anyone have any questions about our pine branch, different brushes? Doing good? Cool. All right. And like Nicole said, just pop in at any time if you have a question. It's not an interruption. It just adds to the class. So, all right. So that's our little pine branch. Let's try now something a little leafier, maybe like a eucalyptus or, you know, something like that. Here we go. I'll use my round brush for this one. And what I'm going to do.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
I was about the watercolor pencils. I went to purchase a watercolor pencil and I ended up getting a packet, but you had one that was just one color that was erasable or?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's a great question. So this is one of the ones that I like to use. It's a brand called Derwent, Derwent. If you've ever gone to a website, blick.com, that's one I'd recommend. They sell the single pencils and in any color you want. I have not found these standalone, like you said, at like a Michael's or Hobby Lobby. Mm-hmm. So that's just, unfortunately, I don't think they have that.
Well, I mean, it's a nice pad. It wasn't that expensive. So.
That's great, though, to have that variety of color. That's awesome. No, that's a great question. But yeah, I can include a link after the class to the pencils that I use. I'd be happy to do that. All right, so if you were here for our last class, this will be a little bit of a refresher, but I'm going to kind of go over this a little more quickly today. But this is just a simple leaf that I love and I use all the time. So I'm going to just stick with my green here to practice. I'm using my round brush and just mixing that up. And again, we're going to wipe that brush off well first. And this little leaf you can create with one simple stroke. You start by touching the end of your brush lightly on the paper. And as you pull down, you press down. And then at the end, you lift up. So it just creates a lovely little leaf. And then you can wipe your brush even more, really get it nice and pointy, and create a stem that comes down. So this is just a nice little leaf to have in your tool belt. We'll do a few more here. It's a light touch and press down and then lift up. So it's really versatile, and I still use this all the time with my botanical work. So it's great for a eucalyptus sprig. You can use it, you can go bigger or smaller with it, depending on your brush size. So you could do like a little mini version of this with a smaller brush, but it is really fun to do. And just once you get the hang of it, it's like you could just paint leaves all day long. So just a good one to have some practice with. So there's a fun little sprig. Now I want to show you kind of a modification of this based on, I've got a little holly leaf here. This is just from my yard. Turns out we have like a huge holly tree in our yard. I've been doing some decorating with it, but yeah, it's very pointy. I didn't realize that you have to like wear gloves, but it is a beautiful, beautiful leaf, especially for winter decor. So I want to show you just the shape of this leaf. Notice how it doesn't come to a rounded point like what we've been practicing. It actually has kind of this really pointy, interesting little outward, spiky point. So I'm going to show you a couple ways that you can do this. And we're going to kind of use this technique, but in a slightly modified way. So I'm going to have my little leaf here for reference. And so I'm looking at this shape. And what I'm going to do is start with the tip of that leaf. And again, I've got water or paint on my brush, and I've wiped it off slightly. So instead of coming straight down like we did with this one, instead, I'm going to do a light touch, press down, and then curve out. That's going to be the top of that leaf. And then I'm going to kind of overlap again at the top, press down and come out. And then I can just sort of fill in the rest of that shape, almost like drawing the edges and filling it in as I come down to the center point. So I'm going to do a couple of these. We'll do another one that starts over here, curves out, and then coming down on either side. And just filling it in. And you can always go back in and make it a little pointier if you need to, but there we go. Now I'm not rotating my paper here just because I don't want to make it all squirrely for you guys, but feel free to move your paper to make it easier for your hand to make that movement, I rotate my paper constantly so that I can keep my hand consistent with what I'm doing. So, all right, let's do one more that kind of starts on this side. So light touch, curving out, and coming towards the center. So there's our little holly sprig. And then, see, I'm touching it up a little bit. That's totally fine. Then what you can do is get a smaller brush. This is a number 1, but a number 2 would work as well. And you can add some little berries. So I've got my red here, and I'm just gonna swirl it around, wipe it off. And then I can come in the middle and make some sweet little berries. So these are pretty straightforward. I like to start by drawing the outside of the berry and then filling it in all the way except for one little circle in the middle that stays open. Let me make sure you guys can see that. And that shows that it's got kind of a reflection to it. Just by leaving that little white spot, it makes it look rounded. So we'll do a couple of those little guys. Again, I'm drawing the outside of that circle and then filling it in. There we go. And of course, you could make your holly sprig, you know, as big as you want to. They actually have really long stems and tons of leaves. And the berries are kind of scattered throughout. This one doesn't show the berries, but so anyway, you can have a lot of fun with this one. And I do recommend, if you have any kind of plants, you know, in your backyard, take a little cutting and bring it inside and study it. That's really one of the best ways to start to learn how botanicals work, is to study the real thing and think about how to find the pattern and paint it. So it's always great to have a real live something to practice with. Another one that I have here, and I apologize, it's like slightly dead. It's just been decoration in my house for a little while, but this is a little juniper plant. And we won't paint this whole thing, but I'll show you how you can do something similar. And you can use any of your brushes for this one. I'm going to stick with my little small brush here, but you could use a flat brush. You could use your larger brush if you want to go bigger. I'll just put him down. But with this one, basically, it's going to be very similar to our pine branch. But what I'm going to do is just kind of see what is the main pattern of this little juniper. So we've got a stem here that comes up the center, and then it branches into these 2 other stems that come off of it. So I'm going to start by drawing that main stem. And I'm going to do that just with a little bit of green. And I can always go over it later to make it brown. But there's the main stem, and then that branches into 2 stems. And then I can just kind of come in and make my little leaves. So I'm getting, again, the green straight from my palette, wiping it really well. And with this one, I'm going to use pretty much even pressure with my stroke. So I'm just going to kind of do whatever feels just like a natural, almost like you're writing with a pencil kind of pressure. And I'm coming on either side. You know, I'm really looking at the pattern of this. They kind of alternate on either side of the stem. and come all the way down. And then sometimes one of the little leaves will actually shoot off and branch into a new little stem. So of course it helps to see the real thing here, but you can kind of just take the pattern and run with it. But it's basically just a little more of a complex version of our pine branch here. So then I can do little lines that alternate again, coming down to the main stem. I think it can be really elegant to keep your decor, you know, if you want to just have a really simple look, just doing a really lovely, simple sprig like this can be all it needs, you know, just kind of studying something from nature and painting it on a little gift tag or card. You can't go wrong with that. So I'm not going to do all of these leaves again, but I just want to show you how, you know, you can just sort of find that pattern and then kind of just repeat it over and over. That's really what happens in nature. You know, it looks so complex. When you look at this, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. But when you can really study it and break down the pattern, then you'll find like, oh, all I really need to do is repeat this stroke, you know, over and over at different angles, layer it a little bit, and there you have it. So a lot of botanical work is really about finding that pattern, you know, practicing how to paint it, and then just repeating it in different ways. So I wanted to show you that with the real thing, just to talk about that a little bit. So again, I could keep going here, but I want to show you, once you've gotten as many leaves in as you want, you know, the stem of this is actually, I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of a brownish color. So I want to show that by coming in just with a touch of brown. And I can go right over that green that I drew and just, you know, go right over top to show that it is a brown stem. And I would do that at the end. So just a little mini lesson there. All right. So there are some fun little sprigs. Now, let's do one more simple berry, getting into some elements we could incorporate into our wreath. So we've got some really nice leaf elements here going on. Let's talk about some little elements we can add to just give color and life to the wreath. So we're going to do some berries and then some really simple flowers that you can also add. So I'm going to switch to my cranberry color. And again, these little elements are really just about finding the pattern and repeating it. So for this little sprig of berries, I'm actually going to lightly draw the stem of a berry branch, and then I'll know where to place my berries on either side of it. So this is my watercolor pencil, but you could also use a normal pencil for this. I will maybe do it darker if I need to, but I'm just going to draw a simple stem that comes down, and then a little sprig that comes off of it. And now that's all I need. That kind of gives me the framework to place these berries. All right, so just like what we practiced here with the holly, I am getting the paint on my brush, wiping it off, and now I can start by drawing the berries, I'm starting with just the outline here. And they typically come in little clusters like this. And, you know, however many you want to make it look full. But I'll kind of do a little cluster like that. And then I'll go ahead and fill it in, leaving that little white spot open. So, and it's okay if they kind of merge together a little bit, that just looks full and nice. So I'm just filling that in. And then I'll do the same thing over on this side. And maybe this one, I just have a couple. Maybe it's not quite as full as that other one. And then I can fill it in. And then all I need to do is come in with my stem color, which I'll use brown again, and go over top of that line that I drew. So I've got my small brush again, wiping it off really well. And just coming wherever I can see that stem, I'm just going right over top of it with my paint. There we go. And then what I might do is add a couple of little mini stems that come off of the main one, like just to show where the berry connects in certain places a little bit. So just enough to show how they're connected. And there we go. So I love adding berries to a wreath. Sometimes I'll do really dark berries, like a dark blue or a dark purple. They're a great way to add a pop of contrast into your wreath. So they're so simple. They're really just a fun little thing to add. All right. So I also want to show you a really simple little flower. I don't think this is really a real flower, but it kind of symbolizes like a poinsettia or just something fun and festive. And I'm going to switch now to my round number 6. And all right, so I'm getting a little water on that brush. And I'm going to actually use this cranberry color. You can use whatever color you want, of course, for the flower. Swirl that brush around and wipe the brush off. So this little flower, we're going to do 5 petals around a center point. And what I'm going to do is actually start with that center point. So I'm going to do that by just drawing a circle that kind of just marks the center, and then all of the leaves or petals will come into that. And this is going to be similar to our simple leaf here, but just slightly fuller. So I've got my paint on my brush. I'm not going to wipe it quite as much, just a couple times. And now what I'm going to do is start by just doing my light touch at the tip, pressing down and kind of slightly curving it into where I drew that circle. And then I'm going to come on the other side and just sort of meet it in that center point. And I'm just going to go around this way, kind of filling in these petals. And I like to sometimes leave a little streak of white there in the middle, just to give it a little bit of interest. And, you know, it can symbolize the vein of the petal or even just a patterning on the petal. But you could, of course, also fill that in totally. It's up to you. So I'm almost like combining that leaf stroke. You know, I'm doing it sort of on one side with the light touch and pressing towards the middle. And then coming on the other side like that. And then filling it in where I need to just a little bit. Now, I want to show you a little situation. This might happen. If you have a little excess water, you know, maybe you didn't wipe your brush off enough, like what I just did. What you can do is rinse off your brush and dry it on your paper towel and just gently add it or touch it into that excess water, and it will absorb that extra water. So another little tip in case you need to make a little fix. All right, so 2 more petals. Now on these 2, because of the way my hand is positioned, I've been starting out and coming in, but on these ones, I'm actually going to start in the middle and then go out. So basically, I'm just doing the opposite, where I press harder at the bottom and then kind of lift as I come out. So you can go either way. It just depends on what's more comfortable for you. But this is just kind of a fun, festive little flower. And I'm gonna keep it that simple. I like having the white in the middle just to represent the center point. But you could always, you know, add in more detail if you wanted to show like lines on the petals or something like that. You could go in with your darker or your smaller brush and a darker color and, you know, go over top of what you painted here and just add in some detail. But that's more of like a stylistic choice. It's really up to you. You can keep it simple, and that's what I'm going to do. All right. So we've done a lot of botanical elements. Now let's talk about just a couple of fun little things you can add to a wreath, like a ribbon or a bow. Okay, so for this, I'm going to actually switch to a flat brush here, but I'll show you with a flat brush and a round brush. The flat brush is really great for this, I will say. And this is a little 1/8 inch flat brush, slightly smaller than the one I was using before. But you can also use the bigger one and just make a bigger ribbon. What I'm going to do is draw the overall shape first, just so I have a guideline, and then I'll paint over it. So of course we've got kind of the little center point of our ribbon. I'm just going to draw a little thing representing that. And then I'm just going to kind of draw the overall shape, just a simple line that comes out, and then the little parts that come down. So there's the ribbon. All right. So now with my flat brush, I can get I'm going to use my red here and wipe it off really well. And the nice thing about the flat brush is it keeps a nice, crisp, even width along your line as you create that stroke. So I'm going to start kind of just at the middle where that bow is tied. And I'm going to start by angling the brush. So just kind of the end of it is pressing down. And then I'm going to curve it around to make it wider so that we get some nice dimension to the ribbon. And then I can sort of go back to my thinner line like that. So I will need to rotate my paper a little bit for this one. It's a little curvy. So again, I'm going to start by doing light pressure with the tip of that flat brush, then pressing along the curve. And I kind of do it to that point, and then I'm going to need to rotate the paper so that my hand can not get all contorted, and continue on and kind of go back to a thin line there where it meets the middle. Excuse me. And then I can do just a simple little downward stroke there in the very middle to show the knot. And then I'm going to use just pretty much an even pressure that comes down. I might press slightly harder towards the end of that little ribbon. And the other side. So, of course, this would be fun to add to the bottom of your wreath or wherever you wanted. You could even, I would do this in a different order, but you could even do like little pine branches or something that kind of come up, and it just ties them together, you know. I won't do the whole thing, but you'll get the idea. Just sort of something really simple. So it's fun to add a ribbon. Makes it festive. All right, so very, very quick, but you'll get the idea. And I'll show you quickly with your round brush as well, because I know you might not have that little flat brush. So I'll go through this one a little more quickly. But again, I would start by drawing it. So I've got my little center point where the knot is. Curve it out. And come down. So now I'm going to use my smaller round brush and kind of just do the same thing where I'm pressing a little harder where it curves around, and doing a thinner stroke where it meets the knot. So rotate the paper. So kind of thin, light pressure, press it around, rotate that paper, and curve it back in. Draw my little knot, and then press down and curve that line around. So of course, if you didn't want it to be a ribbon, you could do just an even line and make it almost like a little twine or something like that, something that's just simpler. So there's our ribbon. All right, how are we doing, guys? Any questions so far? I know I'm going a little quickly through some of these. We're good? Okay.
Would you do the ribbon after, like, so you're going to do a wreath, you do the wreath first and then the ribbon on top?
Right. So we'll
Okay.
talk about that, because you're right. Layering is going to be important. I would actually probably put the ribbon in first, because if it's lighter than the leaves, you know, it's going to overlap and you would see the leaves through it because it's transparent. So we'll talk about that. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, layering gets, it can get a little tricky with a wreath, but we'll talk through it here in a minute. All right. So while we're practicing here, let's just do a really simple little pine tree. And I realize this is not for a wreath, but it's fun just to know how to do a pine tree for gift tags or whatever. And I'll show you two ways to do a pine tree. So I'm going to use just the bottom of my paper here. Feel free to switch to a new page if you need to. All right, so I've got my round number 6, and I'm just gonna get it nice and wet, wipe it off. And I like to do just this simple little pine tree. I add it to all sorts of things, and it can work well in like the background of a landscape painting. But I think it's nice as a little standalone pine tree as well. So I'm getting the paint on the brush, wiping it off really well. And to start, I'm going to draw just the center line of that tree, the trunk of the tree. And that will tell me where to put the branches. And for the branches, we're going to keep this really simple. To start, I'm going to just do a simple little branch that is kind of coming off the top with 2 little branches that kind of curve down on either side of it. And now as I come down to create the branch, I'm going to do almost the same thing as I did with my leaf here. I'm going to start with that light touch and press it down until I meet the trunk. And I'll do that on the other side, just like that. So we'll do a couple of these. It's just like a light touch and a gentle curve, alternating on either side of that trunk. And so you can keep it really simple like this and go all the way down this way. But sometimes what I'll also do is once I've done a couple of these, I'll wipe my brush off even more. And I'll actually kind of do thin little strokes that kind of come off of that main branch and just make it a little more full looking and realistic. So these are like short little strokes, and I'll add this or show this a little closer. Short little strokes that kind of just come off of that main one. It's like it just sort of fluffs it up a little bit. But then I'll keep going with that main stroke. And basically it's the same thing, just each one is going to get a little bit longer than the row before. So coming down, curving it into that trunk. Do a few here. And then wiping the brush off even more and creating those little strokes that kind of pull into the main branch and thicken it up just a little bit. Okay. So that's pretty much it. I'll do a couple more. The big ones here at the bottom. And a couple little strokes that come out. And there we go. Little pine tree. So you might be wondering, if I wanted to like add decorations to this tree? How would I do that? And that is a great question. There's not like an ideal way to do this with watercolor, but the one thing you can do is while that paint is still wet, you can come in with, you know, let's say red and using a smaller brush. You want to wipe this off really, really well and load it up with that paint, wipe it off. And while that layer is still a little wet, you can actually come in and kind of wiggle in your ornament color. And what happens is, because that paint of the green is still wet, when you add a new color into it, it's going to kind of like push away the paint wherever you put that new color. So it's almost like replacing the color. Whereas if you were to wait for that layer to dry fully, you would just be layering the color. And in that case, it wouldn't show up quite as well, because it wouldn't be replacing the color, it would just be adding over top of it. So you have to work kind of quickly to do this. And it's not necessarily going to be, you know, it might kind of blend a little bit, and that's okay. So I'm just going in here and wiggling in that red. And then I will show you another medium you can use to go over top of watercolor and do some layering in a more kind of straightforward way. And oh, thank you, Judith. Well, I always tell my students, it helps that I do this all day, every day. You know, I've just been painting for a long time, and it really is just practice. It really is just practice. Okay, so here are my little ornaments, and they really show up pretty well. But one thing I'll just show you really quickly, I won't get into this too much, but there is a medium that's almost like an opaque watercolor, and it's called gouache. You've probably heard of it. A lot of illustrators use it, and I use it a little bit myself, especially for little details like this. This is my gouache palette. It's really messy, but basically this is like watercolor, except that it, like I said, it's opaque, but it is water soluble. So I can get, I'll go ahead and get a fresh color here. It comes in little tubes like this, and this is a white. And so the neat thing is you can even put white over top of your dark, which really comes in handy sometimes. So I can just take this white straight out of my tube there, get it on my brush. And now I can go right over top of that dark color, and it will show up. Like if I'm doing a little strand of popcorn or something, or lights. So hopefully you can see that. It is a really great medium for these little details like this. So there is a way you can sort of do this with watercolor. You could use something called masking fluid, which actually preserves the white of the paper first, and then you paint over it and remove it later. But that it just starts getting a little tricky. So honestly, gouache is just a great medium to have on hand. So anyway, that's just a really fun and quick little tree. Of course, you could keep it just a natural tree, and that's a lovely element as well. All right. Well, I think we've got some good things to work with here for our wreath. And before I jump into that, do we have any questions? Okay, so I'm going to move this page to the side. I'll keep it kind of nearby for reference. But now I want to just show you kind of a quick overview of how to create a wreath, specifically how to layer the elements of a wreath. You have to be a little bit strategic, but it's a lot of fun. So first thing, and this is just, don't worry about this for this practice one, it's helpful to have a little thing that you can trace to create a circle for your wreath. So this is just like the lid of a candle. You can use anything, doesn't matter. And so I'm going to go ahead and just draw this with my pencil here. Trace that around. All right, so now I have a nice guideline for the wreath. And it does help to use a watercolor pencil for this, because then it will dissolve as you paint. It won't show through, but no worries if you don't have one of these. A watercolor or a pencil, regular pencil is great. So the key with a wreath is to work from light to dark. That is really the main thing you want to do. And so before I start, I want to kind of define in my palette, what are my lights and what are my darks? So I'm going to be using the green straight from my palette. This will be kind of a mid-tone color. I can water it down a little bit to make it lighter, or I could really mix it in and go a little darker with it. So that can have a good range. I'm going to definitely use my little cranberry color here. Again, you can water down a color to make it lighter if you want to. So we'll use that. That's another kind of mid-tone. And then we've got our dark, and I'm going to use this spruce color we mixed up earlier with the green and the purple. And this will be my nice little pop of contrast that I can add in at the end. So I'm going to keep my palette pretty simple and just work with these colors right here. All right. So like I mentioned with the ribbon, you actually want to add it pretty early on in the process, because you're going to want your leaves to be behind the ribbon. So you kind of want to know where it is so you can work around it. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that in here at the bottom, just like I did before, going right over top of my circle. All right. And I'm going to leave it just drawn for now, and then I can do my paint here in a moment. The other thing that I want to start with is, am I going to have any flower elements in my wreath? And if so, we also want to think about where those are going to be placed. And what I'll do first is actually just use my pencil and really lightly kind of lay out a circle that represents the overall shape of that flower. So I might have them kind of evenly scattered around, or I might kind of cluster a couple of them and make them just kind of asymmetrical, perhaps. I might just do like 3. So I'll have 2 down here and 1 up here. So I know that was really light. I'll hold it up a little bit. So that's my framework to start with before we paint. Okay. So now, before I do these elements, I'm going to start with my lightest color. And with this one, I'm going to be doing kind of a leafy branch, similar to this one, a little bit lighter than this one. And I'm actually going to move a little bit of my green into the lid of my palette just to lighten it up a little bit more. And to do that, I'm just adding a tiny bit of water. So this is going to be my light green. And now, wipe that brush off. Now I can start going around with my leaves, just keeping in mind that I don't want to really creep into that area where my flowers are going to be quite yet. So I'm going to go kind of up here to start with, and I'm just going to start. And I'm doing that stroke where I touch lightly. Sorry, I realize my hand is covering that up a little bit. Touch lightly and press in. And we'll kind of do that to start with. And then what I like to do is kind of just rotate my paper so that I can stay consistent with my stroke. And basically, I'll just be repeating this along that circle. So again, we're going to go back and forth with that little stroke. And rotate here. Sorry. Okay. And I do have my little flower that's going to go here. So I'm going to skip over that and then do maybe one more branch to start with. All right, so this is a nice little base layer for the wreath. Start getting it kind of full looking and, you know, give it a starting point. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do are those flowers and ribbon. So this is getting just kind of one notch darker in color, and then I can start to add in my darks working around those lighter elements. So I'm going to do that simple flower we practiced using my cranberry, and I'm going to lighten this one slightly as well for the flower. So I'm moving a little bit over to my palette and watering it down just a little bit. Okay. Swirling it into my brush and wiping it off really well. So I've got two flowers here, and because of the scale of this, I might actually switch brushes. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is. We'll see. I might try both, but we'll start with, this is my smaller brush. And I'm going to use that at least to draw that center point of the flower. And now I can come in with my bigger brush and do my little petal that comes down and meets that center point. Rotating around. And meeting in the middle. Okay. And then I'll do one more right next to it, and again, draw that center point. So I'm just going to go ahead and do all three of the flowers that I want to add. And they might overlap a little bit, and that's okay. And one more. And of course, you might do a wreath that doesn't have any flowers. And if that were the case, it's a little bit simpler. You can just kind of do your leaves the whole way around and not worry about keeping the space for the flowers. But I wanted to show you this just so you have the option. Okay. So I'm being a little careful where, you know, that little sprig of green comes in. I'm kind of working around it a little bit. Okay. Now I have a little leaf that comes in right where I want to put that petal. And so I'm actually going to go ahead and pretend that that leaf is coming over top of the flower. So when I make this petal, I'm going to start, but then stop where it hits that leaf and then come around behind it. And this is how we'll start to create some nice layering and overlapping in our wreath. So there we go. Now I've got my flowers in. And next I'm going to do the ribbon, because this is that other element that we're going to need to work around just a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to use that slightly darker cranberry color that we mixed earlier, straight from the palette. I've got my little flat brush here, but again, use whatever brush you have. All right, so again, with the ribbon, it's that light touch and then pressing a little harder towards the curve. Here we go. And I'll rotate the page here. Okay. And draw that little knot in the middle. And then come down with the ribbon. All right. So now the rest of the elements we add are really just going to be continuing to layer, but just keeping in mind, you know, that we have these elements that we're working around. And so we'll have to be a little bit careful in those areas. So next, I'm going to add a little bit of a pine branch over top of some of these leaves. And I'm going to use my flat brush for this just because it's nice and quick. Taking the green straight from my palette for this one. And so what I'll do is kind of just work in a little branch there. And then do my little strokes that kind of come out from that main branch. And then I might even do one that kind of comes out from that and branches out this way. So you can of course add any type of elements that you want into this, but the pine branch is a fun one. Right. So there's that. Again, I'm just working my way around, rotating that paper as needed. So let's say that in certain places you want to show that the darker color is actually coming out behind that lighter color. You'll do the same thing we did with this little flower here. You can start your branch, you know, wherever you want to, but as soon as you hit that lighter color leaf, you're just gonna go around it or behind it. So you just stop wherever that little lighter leaf overlaps it, and you kind of just poke the darker branch in behind it. So you have to be a little careful, more careful with this, but it can start to create some really lovely, more complex looking aspects to your wreath. Oops. Okay. So I'll just do a couple more here. And then, of course, you know, where we are down here where the ribbon is, we still want to show that there are some leaves and greens down there. So now what I'll do is I might come in with a little more of my lighter green and kind of just work around that ribbon. So I will draw my little leaf, but stop where that ribbon is. And then poke it, just poke it behind. And again on this side. So that's why we want to show the ribbon or paint the ribbon in first, because we want it to still really stand out over top of those greens. All right. So now I want to start adding in just some final sprigs to show some darker colors. And I'm going to switch to my spruce color for this one. And I'm not going to do too much of this, but it's really nice to add a darker color into your wreath to really give some good contrast. So for this one, let's see, what I'm going to do is just kind of a smaller version of that lighter leaf. And maybe it's like just a smaller, like a eucalyptus or something. And so I'm going to come in now with just some shorter strokes. Maybe they're just a little bit longer and overlap right over top of those other leaves. And I'm also going to show some that kind of poke out from behind these flowers a little bit. Again, being a little bit careful where I meet that flower. Show my paint here. I might do some that overlap the flower a little bit. So I really just want to show how to think about layering when you're combining all of these elements together. And finally, we'll just go around with a couple more. just to fill it out a little bit. So if you wanted to, you could, of course, keep it really simple and just repeat, maybe only 1 or 2 elements. And that is just as beautiful. It's really up to you and how complex you want to go. All right. And last but not least, I'm going to add in just a few little berries. These are going to be really, really simple, just to add a tiny pop of color. And I'll use my cranberry again, getting it really nice and mixed up. I'm even gonna add just a little more color into my palette. And with my small brush, now I can come in and just I like to add berries in, just sort of like almost coming into the middle a little bit. You could do some that are more incorporated into the leaves as well. But yeah, just these tiny little berries really add a lot to the wreath with that contrast. So I know we're almost out of time here, guys, and this one went really fast. But I hope that when you practice these elements, you can use any of these as like a standalone decor on a gift tag or a card. Or of course, you could really go all the way and make a wreath. This would be lovely for a Christmas card. I think you could write something in the middle. So many things you can do with a wreath. So we'll just put the finishing touches here. And one thing I'll sometimes do, once the main elements are in, is I might overlap and darken some colors. And I think I'm going to do that on my ribbon. I want this to be a little bit of a more prominent element. So I'm literally just going to go right over top of that ribbon with my cranberry and darken it in. But the nice thing is, because we already had it in place and we worked around it, I can darken it really easily just by going right over top of those lines. All right. Well, guys, are there any questions about our wreaths this morning? I know we covered a lot here. What I didn't get into was, and this is just, you can keep going with this later. Gift tags are so simple to make. I literally just cut out some little rectangles and squares out of watercolor paper. You can even trim the edges if you want to really make it cute, and then just with a hole punch, you can, voila, have a gift tag. And so anything we painted today, I think would look adorable on these little guys. You could even do very, very simple wreaths, like a way simpler version of this on a little square gift tag. And then you can, of course, make cards out of the watercolor paper by simply like scoring the paper and making a little folded card. So anyway, guys, I hope that you had fun and learned a couple things. Are there any questions?
I just-
Anyone want to show? Oh, here's Jacqueline. Hold
Yeah,
on,
I
Jacqueline.
found it so helpful to when we got the recording to listen to it again once I got the
Yes.
size. So I did do
Yes.
that, and I intend to listen to this one again.
Good, because I
Yeah, but
know we kind of
here's
breezed
mine.
through. Oh my goodness,
My bows need work.
Jacqueline, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the bow, I used that technique. I tried the bow 3 times. It looks like it's floating, but that's.
The ribbon is a little tricky. It is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you did a great job with the layering on it though. Good job. Anyone else have some show and tell? Oh boy. Anna, oh my goodness. Beautiful. I love your palette.
I didn't have enough of the right colors apparently, so I just started blending it to make it work.
Hey, perfect. That's what you do. That's awesome.
But it was fun. Thank you so much.
Oh, good. Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. Anyone else?
I'll show mine.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, look at that. Oh my goodness, April. Oh, that's so gorgeous. I love
It was
how
really
you added
fun.
the little berries.
I'll show mine as well. I
Oh my goodness.
I like poinsettias, that's
Cindy.
for sure.
Oh, I love how you did the flowers.
Yeah, I like
Oh, they're
those.
so
Ooh,
lively.
the ribbon is hard.
The ribbon is hard, guys. It is. Yes. Again, you can just do twine if you want to. Keep it like rustic.
Okay, I'll show mine.
I love seeing these, you guys. Oh, Sue, it's beautiful. Oh my goodness, that is so sweet. So sweet. Great job, you guys. Well, thank you again so much for being here. I love teaching watercolor, and just so you know, I am available via email if you ever have questions. So don't hesitate. We can send it out in the email after the class. So, yeah, good job, guys. I hope everyone has an absolutely wonderful holiday. And I know we always love to see your finished projects. So send them along to the Modern Prairie email or just post on Instagram. We love, love, love to see that.
Thank you, Leana, as always, your teaching methods and style. I mean, it's so wonderful and kind of cathartic to watch. So we can't wait to actually create cards this year, because I think people will really appreciate the personalization. So like you said, give us about a day to take this video and consolidate. We'll share it so that you can reference it again. And but again, share your creations with us. We love it. And happy holidays, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Leana.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.